Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the carers meeting. Several of you I know will have joined other meetings that Rare Dementia Support have been hosting online in this format since the lockdown began. But if you haven't, then you are very warmly welcomed to this first online carers meeting. As we have started, I think, in most of the other online meetings we've hosted, it's important to say we're really missing you. We are really missing being able to warmly greet you, and we're painfully aware of all of the bits of our meetings that we're really missing. The most important bits being you getting to talk to each other, share experiences and a catch up over a coffee, and to be able to feel like you have been met by someone who knows what it's like to live in your shoes at the moment. All of those reservations and problems of online meetings aside, we really do warmly welcome you to this meeting. We've got a host of great speakers today, and most importantly, lots of time for your questions and answers later in the session, which would be great if you can share with us during the session and at that time. So it's really only for me to say that I'm Seb Crutch, by the way. I'm one of the psychologists working with the Rare Dementia Support team, and you'll be going to be meeting a whole bunch of other members of the team and other members during today's session. Let me hand over now to Nikki Zimmerman, the head of the Rare Dementia Support Direct Support team, to tell you a little bit more about the agenda.
Good morning, everybody, and it's lovely to be here, but as Seb says, we really miss seeing you and having coffee with you in the mornings before we start our sessions, and just seeing all those lovely faces that we speak to on the telephone and we email, and we don't actually get to see your faces today, but I wish we could. But hopefully we've got some great speakers today. We've got a really good agenda, and we've got a lot of time for questions afterwards, so hopefully we can answer some of your questions. We know it's a really difficult time for everybody at the moment with COVID-19 and pandemic and sort of the consequences that this is bringing for everybody, so hopefully today will be a bit of help for you. So on our agenda today, we have our lovely Dr. Ida Torres-Gonzalez, who we've sent out the behaviour records, so she's going to talk through the school that she's been working with, and hopefully give you some pointers and advice on to help you with support at home. We've then got one of our members, which we're delighted is joining us today, Vali Yanni. Vali is a partner of her husband who has dementia with Lewy bodies, and she is coming to give some great advice and insight to what her journey is like at the moment, and how she supports her husband in a very, very positive way. We have then got the lovely Claire Waddington. Claire is one of my colleagues on the direct support team, and Claire is going to talk about the support team and what we can offer, and also the impact project which she's very much involved with. So hopefully that will be really helpful for you, and encourage more of you to be involved. I'm going to do a quick roundup about the Buddy and Network that we set up earlier this year, which has really sort of taken off in sort of the COVID time. And then we will be going back to Seb, who will be hosting the question and answers session today. And on the panel for that, we will have Vali and Ida, and we'll also be joined by one of the lovely nurses from the Candid service, Anna, and Livy, who is also part of our direct support team. So there'll be plenty of people there to answer questions. So please, you can type them in, get them over to the team, and we can answer as many as possible later. Okay, so I think we'll just hand you straight over to Ida now. Ida, are you there?
Yes, sorry, yes, I was mute, but I'm here now. Okay.
Brilliant.
So I think, yes, brilliant. Can you all see the presentation? I think you can. All right, let me prepare. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So it is my pleasure to be here today taking part in this support group. And my presentation has an only very simple goal, which is to show you how to modify behaviors that you would like to change in the daily interaction with your relative or your friend with cognitive difficulties. Next slide, please. And for this, I'll explain what a behavior record is and how to use it. Next slide. So a behavior record is a tool. It is a very simple recording system, and it is based on scientific understanding of human behavior. Next slide. A behavior is something that you do. For instance, if I'm someone living with cognitive difficulties, and we are in lockdown because of COVID, and I show up all of a sudden in the living room and say to my partner, bye, I'm going to the shops, and I walk towards the door. This is an example of a behavior. Next slide. And every behavior is caused by something, and that something is the trigger, is what we call the trigger. And the trigger is what happens just before the behavior. For instance, before me heading off to the shops, I felt bored and restless, and that feeling was the trigger of my behavior. Next slide. And our behavior also leads to a reaction from the other person who is with us at that moment. In this case, my husband gets alarmed and stands between me and the door, saying that there is risk of infection and he cannot let me out on my own. Next slide. And his response may feed back on this cycle and become a trigger itself, because it can also exacerbate my behavior. Next slide. And this is what we call the trigger behavior response cycle. Next slide, please. And there is a very important rule to remember if we want to break this cycle. Next slide. If we want to modify a behavior and we want to break this cycle, we have to either remove the trigger or change our response to it. This is key. So you have to take action on one of these elements to generate change. And you use a behavior record to achieve this. Next slide. So let me now show you how to put this into practice, and let's do together an exercise using a behavior record. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so I believe that all of you have received a behavior record like this one here, and you were asked to prepare an example of a behavior that you would like to modify. So all of you who want to participate in this exercise, it is not mandatory. Maybe some of you want to do it and others just want to listen to the talk. But all of you who want to take part, can you all please make sure that you have your behavior record in front of you? Next slide. A fundamental advice when we are using behavior records is to focus on one behavior at a time. It is a very common mistake trying to tackle many behaviors that we don't like or that we want to change at the same time, and that is a mistake, because if you try to work on more than one at a time, it becomes too complicated and it won't work. So this is very important, and we are going to focus on a single behavior for this exercise. Next slide. So let me set the scene for the example that I will use. Mary lives with her husband, Peter, who has cognitive difficulties. Next slide. And every morning, when Mary is finishing her breakfast, Peter comes to the kitchen. Next slide. And sometimes, while in the kitchen, Peter notices the car keys hanging from the key hook. Next slide. And then he announces that he's going for a drive and walks in the direction of the key hook. Next slide. And Mary responds, reminding him that he cannot do that because he's not longer allowed to drive and he doesn't have a license anymore. And a conflict is served. Next slide. Peter shouts, Mary tries to stop him from reaching the keys, and they have an argument, and they both are left very, very upset and angry and distressed. So let's try to change this with the help of our behavior record. Next slide. Please all try to write the behavior that you want to modify in this box, as Mary has done. So you go to your behavior record, and under the word behavior, please annotate the behavior that you would like to change, as brief and as concise as you can. I will give you 15 seconds to do this, okay? Next slide, please. All right, and now we need to register the trigger. And remember that the trigger is what happens just before the behavior appears. It's not what you think that may have happened. It's not your speculation about the reason of the behavior. It's what you were able to observe. So the thing that happened just before the behavior appeared. And in this case, the trigger was the sight of the keys. It was Peter seeing the keys. So now, can you write down what happens just before the behavior that you want to change appears? I will give you 15 seconds to do this. Next slide. And now we register our reaction. So how do we respond to that behavior? So how do you respond to the behavior that you want to change? And please write it down as Mary did here. So Mary annotated what she did. Her response to Peter's behavior was saying, you no longer drive, you have no license, and it is not safe. So I will give you 15 seconds for you to annotate what is your reaction to the behavior that you want to change. Next slide. And lastly, we need to annotate the consequences of that reaction. So do we make it worse with our response? Do we make it better? Usually, if we want to change it, is probably because we are making it worse and we want to make it better. So please write that, what happens after your reaction, in the corresponding box in the behavior record. Again, I will give you 15 seconds to do this. Next slide. All right, so now we have our cycle very well registered in front of us. And in order to break this cycle, we know that we have two options, either trying to change the trigger or our response. Next slide. So Mary is going to try to remove the trigger first, and she has written here in the left bottom corner, she's written trigger, and I'm gonna go for the trigger first. Next slide. So she gives it a bit of thinking and comes up with the decision to remove the keys from the key hook and keep them in a drawer instead. and see what happens, because this may or may not work, because this is a process of trial and error and creativity. So can you think of a way to remove the trigger of the behavior that you would like to modify? I'm gonna give you 15 seconds to think a bit about this and maybe make a note. Next slide. All right, so maybe for some reason, Mary cannot remove the trigger. We are not always able to remove the triggers. So she may decide to change her response instead. For instance, she may have decided that next time Peter says he's going for a ride, she will encourage him to sit to have coffee with her and leave the ride for later. And again, she needs to put this into practice and see what happens, if the conflict may be prevented this way or not. Can you think of a way also to respond differently to the behavior that you want to change? Can you think of an alternative? Doesn't need to be super creative or perfect. It's just an exercise to think of an alternative. Can you do that and maybe annotate it in the corresponding box in the behavior record? And I will give you again 15 seconds for this. Next slide. So that's it. Those are the basics of how to use a behavior record, and those are the reasons of for using it. And I want to make clear that this is far from being a perfect recipe. It is a skill that takes time and practice to develop and nurture, and it also requires support. Someone needs to train you to do it properly, and it is impossible to learn how to do it well in 10 minutes, which is the time that this talk has taken. But we thought that although imperfect, it was an important piece of information to place in your hands at this moment. So I hope you have found it useful. Next slide, please. And thank you very much for your time and attention today.
Thank you so much, Ida. That was fantastic. And I really hope that was really useful for all of you that are watching this today. And, you know, please, if you have any questions on this, please get your questions in for Ida at the panel session later. Or you can contact us directly at a later date if anything comes up, and we can liaise with Ida to get some support sorted for you. Now I'd like to introduce, and I'm really happy to have a member on our team today for the presenters. So I'd love to introduce to you Vali Yanni. And Vali is a caregiver for her husband who is living with dementia and Lewy bodies. And Vali is coming here today to talk to you about the positive support that she provides and to support her husband. So I'll hand over to you now, Vali. Thank you so much.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, sorry, I've been trying to unmute myself. Right, okay, so thanks, Nikki. Thank you very much, and thanks, Ida. And I hope my little talk will follow neatly from Ida's presentation. And I'm calling it here not defined by dementia, which is something I really feel strongly about. So I'm only sharing our experience, myself and my husband. I really know for sure and appreciate every experience in dementia is unique. So there's no way that I'm saying what I'm saying here is necessarily similar or completely relevant to everybody. Every experience with dementia is unique. So I'm just going to share our unique experience. So not defined by dementia, I hope it will be explained through the actual talk. 3.5 years ago, and Emily, I'm going to leave you to just follow my talk and follow the slides. 3.5 years ago, I would have introduced myself as Vali Yanni, a development consultant and a facilitator. That's my professional life, and that's my circle of life. Part of that circle is my husband, and married to Des O'Sullivan. And Des is a project manager, is an author, editor, and trainer in English language teaching world. So together, we have a company professionally called Quality Outcomes Limited, QOL. And also we have, push on Emily, please. And also between us, we have the two wonderful kids, Yasmina and Yusuf. So as the picture shows, there's two circles here equally in the same size. So what we thought would be kind of a completely equal partnership, and everything was an equal partnership, life-wise, marriage-wise, parenthood-wise, and professional-wise as well. So that's 3.5 years ago. Now, Des, 3.5 years ago, was 60, turned 60 in October. And then in November in that year, we had a nasty birthday present. He had the label of dementia. So we had dementia, and his dementia was Lewy body dementia. So with that label on, it kind of shifted and changed quite a lot in that dynamic. And I'd like to just, if you can see the slides, just keep in mind and in your head that two equal circles that we have been living together up until that big label of dementia. So in the first 2 years of our life with the diagnosis, there are 4 key kind of major changes that took place in and affected that dynamic. So one of these dynamics was a circle of death. All of a sudden, and instead of introducing himself as the project manager, the editor, or all of that, it's Des with Lewy body. And the circle started to shrink in terms of confidence, in terms of abilities, in terms of things that he does. And in relation to that, my circle has expanded hugely. So Vali is doing stuff, lots of stuff, and probably a lot of what I've been doing is not that different from a lot of you that take up that role of in your partnership with somebody living with dementia. So from appointments to writing letters to applications to doing the finances, doing the accounts for the company, just a lot ended up in my circle, and imbalance took place between his circle and my circle. And the two of us got completely sucked into that, picture of dementia with Lewy body. So we've been kind of living in that picture with Lewy body dementia, and so we've been boxed into that green box, Emily, and everything we did was rubber stamped dementia. Whatever we did was within the context of dementia. The two of us were just living, eating, drinking, everything inside that box of dementia. So if you move on with me, Emily, please. Then with that, I started as the time passed. So everything was done through dementia. As the time passed, which is the next slide, Emily, is as the time passes on, the Des remained in that circle, and his circle started to grow a little bit, but inside the box of Lewy dementia, I started to feel resentful. I started resenting that, being sucked into it. My life has been completely defined by dementia, as was in the slide before. We were both defined by dementia in everything we do. So I started to shift and move out of that circle slowly but surely. There's a lot that obviously I've done with Des together inside that box, that area of me, not with Des, but inside the box is about me learning about dementia, continuing to learn about it, read about it, doing a lot about it. Less stuff was done completely defined by dementia, so it's kind of, for me at least, so spread around a little bit. So I was trying to move out and resent the idea that I would be defined by dementia, and Des as well. So then, as time passes again, 3.5 years after diagnosis, which is the moment which we are now, so sorry, the slide before I can see it. So there's with me trying to move out of that circle, of that box of dementia, I started to see this. I started to actually see what he is going through. So I started to validate what he's going through, to actually say, yes, Des, this is what you're going through. What do we do about it? Rather than my immediate response, as Ida was saying, I was focusing on the response from my side. At the same time, I was trying to advocate a lot for what he needs and his the support that he needs in terms of rights and benefits and all the rest of it. So the next slide is, as time again passes, 3.5 years after diagnosis, Des's circle has started to grow bigger, and that is more significant for me, that he's gained a lot of confidence. He's still doing a lot within the dementia box. He's done like a video to, raising awareness. He's done, radio talks. He's written pieces. He goes to meetings. There's a lot happening in his life. But most significantly, that blue bit that you see sticking out of the green box is the most important thing for me, that he can actually see there is life outside the box of dementia. So it's not completely 100% defined by dementia. I am still in that box, obviously. That's the next bit, is that I'm still inside. There's still that I think I do with Des still. There is a little bit underneath that I still continue to learn and know about dementia. There is the part that covers between, so that's a little bit, yes, that I'm still learning. The next one to it is the kind of joint bit between me and Des, and that is the area that I protect for our partnership together. That's outside dementia, so not everything we do within that definition of dementia. Most precious of all is that tiny, tiny triangle bit, which is the blue bit. And this is for me, it's the empowering, what Nikki was saying about the positive support that I give to Des. This is when I think it's fantastic that you actually can do, but I can't do this, Valley. You actually can do it. Let's see how we can do it, how you can do it. And there's nothing that pleases me more than seeing him in that tiny little blue part here, what I feel that he's got sense of empowerment, that he still can do things, still living the experience of dementia, but he still can do things. And finally, with those three things in mind, I feel like to some degree I've managed to pull myself out and not to be defined by dementia. I know what the boundaries are. It's very difficult still for Des, and it's very difficult for me to bring Des as much as possible, to increase that blue bit as much as possible while he still has the capacity and the skills. So not defined by dementia for me, it encompasses three things. It's the validation of the experience that he is going through and not ignoring it. It's actually empowering him, so he knows there are things that he can still do, some with my support, others without. And finally, being able to advocate for on his behalf, for what he still needs and what he is entitled to. And that's our journey with Lewy body dementia. Thanks, everybody.
Vali, thank you so much for sharing that. That's really, really helpful. And it's amazing how you've managed to translate a very complicated and important story over in different chapters over a long period of time into such beautiful and simple but evocative diagrams. I found those really helpful. Thank you. And it's really helpful, I think, for just to help you all understand. There are 100 of you present here at the moment listening in and having a shared experience, and it's great that Vali started with the point that, of course, all of our experiences are individual, and especially listening to Vali and seeing how Vali describes herself emerging from that kind of entombed within that box, or being free, being entombed within that box, and then being able to come out again. I hope that just underlines the fact that in things you hear today, as people share their experiences and we talk about other people we have the privilege of working with, you may hear some things which really resonate with you, and particularly with where you are right now. And there may be other experiences which feel completely different. It might be that you're feeling very down, and so to hear someone talk about feeling empowered is a bit alienating for you. And that's where it's so helpful to hear Vali talk about how things change over time. And so even if this is not, some of these experiences are not you right now, the possibility that they could be at some point in the future, I hope is of some encouragement. So Vali, thank you so much indeed. Next, it's really a pleasure to welcome Claire Waddington onto your screens. Hi Claire. Claire is a fantastic member, as Nikki said, of the direct support team. Many of you will have spoken to her on the phone or by email or at meetings. And Claire's going to tell you a little bit about her and Libby's work with Nikki on the direct support team, and a bit about the study we're conducting to try and capture some of the rich conversations we're involved in and the impact which support groups, and particularly the bringing together of people in the same experience with the similar experiences can have for you. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Seb. So it's really, really lovely being able to be with you here today, although of course I would much prefer to be able to see all of you in person. So some of you I may have met at previous support group meetings or had email or phone contact with, but for those that I haven't met before, I'm a member of the Rare Dementia Support Direct Support Team alongside my lovely colleagues, Nikki Zimmerman, who spoke earlier today, and Libby Wood. So the Direct Support Team provides information and guidance over the phone and online to rare dementia support members from all over the world. These members include health professionals, people living with a rare dementia, as well as those supporting someone with a rare dementia, which might include their friends and family members. So the support that the Direct Support Team provides includes helping people to navigate how to get a formal diagnosis, as we do know that many people struggle with this, and that it's not uncommon for people to go through a really long process of diagnosis or to initially be misdiagnosed. As well as providing information and navigation on getting a diagnosis, the Direct Support Team also provides post-diagnostic support to help people living with a rare dementia and those supporting them to better understand the condition and to put in place some practical strategies to support their own well-being alongside the person that they may be caring for. We provide guidance on empowering the person living with a rare dementia to maintain their independence where possible, to continue to engage in meaningful activities, and if more support is needed for that person, to direct people to the appropriate local health and social care support to help meet those additional needs. So the Direct Support Team also provides guidance and information on advanced care planning, which might include thinking about introducing additional care into the home and getting the support in place earlier rather than later. It may also include supporting someone to transition into a care home and providing information to assist their care home to better understand and support that person with their specific needs. This can also include supporting people to think about planning for emergencies and having a care plan in place so that if you are providing support to somebody living with a rare dementia, and if for some reason you're not able to provide that level of support, then there is a plan in place so that that person that you're caring for receives the help that they may need. We've also put together some resources to support people if they are caring for someone with a rare dementia that's going into hospital and may not be able to easily communicate their own needs to the staff, as we do know that this is a particular concern for people, especially at this time. So we realise that the current situation has been incredibly difficult for many people affected by rare dementias because of the change in routine, because many regular groups and activities have been put on hold, and because people may not have the same access to their usual forms of support. We have had an increase in the number of people contacting the direct support team as a result of these changes, and we've been supporting people to put in place routines and different ways of coping whilst these restrictions are in place. Carers may also be finding it really difficult at the moment if they are caring for someone with a rare dementia who they don't live with, so who maybe lives on their own or who lives in a care home. So we've been supporting people with how to stay connected with the person living with the rare dementia if they are in this situation, and also how to make sure that person is safe and supported. We're also trying new ways to connect our members with each other where possible, with the buddying scheme that Nikki will shortly be talking about, and by facilitating small online groups to enable people to meet with each other, to share their experiences, tips and strategies. These groups have up to 12 people at a time and have included topics such as what support health professionals can provide, care planning, independence and identity, grief and loss. And we've also had a really amazing group specifically for people with a diagnosis of a rare dementia themselves. So these groups so far have been fantastic, with members creating a really engaging and supportive environment for each other. And it's been a really helpful learning experience on our end as well to be able to take part in these discussions. So we will be sending out the dates for the upcoming groups shortly. So please do book onto these sessions if you feel that it would be helpful for you to be able to meet with other people in this way. Rare Dementia Support has also put together several COVID-related resources that are available on the website, including an emergency kit with suggestions of at-home activities to keep people engaged and to help build those routines, strategies to support people with communication and behavioural symptoms, and tips on how to look after your own well-being if you are caring for someone else. There are also some short videos with tips and strategies on managing during the lockdown, featuring the lovely Ida who spoke earlier in this session, as well as suggestions of arts and cultural resources to help keep people engaged in meaningful activities. So some examples of which include virtual dance classes, museum tours, arts and creative activities, and music sessions. So as well as providing one-on-one support, the direct support team also helps to link people into the Rare Dementia Support Impact Project, as many of the people that we contact for support are also interested in taking part in research. So the Rare Dementia Support Impact Project is a worldwide study looking at the impact of support groups for people affected by rare dementias. So this includes current and former carers, as well as people with a diagnosis of a rare dementia themselves. People participating in this project can be involved in a number of different ways, depending on what suits them. Some examples can include taking part in interviews, being involved in online aspects, and engaging in creative activities as well. So in a number of our support conversations, members might raise that they would like to be involved in research, but they may be worried that they won't qualify for studies, or they may be concerned that their experiences aren't going to be valuable in the context of research, perhaps because they may be caring for someone in the very early stages, or because they may have cared for someone in the past. So we have already had interviews with a number of carers, as well as people living with a rare dementia, and the carers that we've spoken with have all been at various stages of caring and have provided incredibly valuable insight into their experiences, and we're hugely grateful for this. We've also had people take part in interviews who maybe initially felt that they didn't have any support needs, But through the conversations we've had in the context of research, they've discovered that there are actually some particular aspects of caring or of living with a rare dementia that they're actually finding quite difficult, and that they would benefit from having a separate conversation about their support needs as well. As the Rare Dementia Support Impact Project is so closely tied with our support service, we've then been able to link those people in with further support where that's been needed. So I just want to finish by saying that caring for someone with a rare dementia can feel very overwhelming, particularly with navigating where to go for the right support and struggling to find health and social care professionals that are maybe aware of the condition or that understand the person's needs and that are able to assess and support your needs alongside the person with the diagnosis. It's important to know that there is support available if you are finding things difficult, and accessing the support can make a huge difference to your well-being as well as the person that you are supporting. So if you feel that additional support would be helpful.
Oh no.
I'll be happy to arrange a time to talk with you further. Thank you.
Claire, thank you so much. Just to reassure people, in case they're worrying about their internet signal, I think we all lost just a tiny snippet of Claire at the end there, but if I understood it, Claire's final point was basically that we're here for you, and at any time, please do contact us by email or pick up the phone, and there is support for you. I hope that's a fair summary of what you were saying at the end there, Claire. Thank you very much. Really helpful summary of what's available. I think I can't repeat enough times what a difference it makes, I think, and what a change it is from the sort of historical period when rare dementia support was trying to help by bringing people together just in physical meetings, to the stage now where very, very proactively keen to hear from you as often as you want to be in touch to try and provide all the support we can, or where we can't help to signpost you onto someone else. So that's a really great summary, Claire. Thank you very much. Just before I go on to Nikki, it's just a reminder that in a few moments we'll move into more of a question and answer session. And questions and answers makes it sometimes seem like we have to have very striking or interesting up-to-date questions. We want anything, comments, reflections, things you've heard that you agree with, things that you've heard that don't hold true for you. Please do feel free. It doesn't need to be perfectly worded. I will try and give voice in this strange online situation. I will try and give voice to your questions or comments. So anything that you would like to share with anyone else, even if you're not quite sure it's for sharing, I can judge that for you. And so please do put any comments in the question box or questions, and we will, in a few minutes, bring Anna and Nikki and Claire and a few of us back onto the screen to try and address and share some of those. So without further ado, back to our wonderful Nikki Zimmerman, who's going to tell you a little bit about the Buddying Network.
Thank you, Seb. And I just want to sort of spend a few minutes to talk about sort of buddying, because I think it's really important, especially at this time that we're at. So while Rare Dementia Support has been expanding sort of with the groups that we've been doing in the meetings, obviously they're not physical at the moment, and we've introduced new small groups as well. And we've also seen an increase in sort of local and regional groups popping up as well. But we do know that, you know, sometimes this is not accessible for everybody, and people are really isolated in their caring role. Coronavirus came along and that has really magnified this isolation for people. And we wanted to really do something sort of to connect people, to help with that isolation, and get some opportunities for people to connect with each other, to share their similar situations, understand those difficult days, but also be inspired by those really sort of good days that people are having, and, you know, help with some situations. So like I said, COVID-19 came along, and we were constantly told on the TV that this was unprecedented times. March the 23rd, everything went into lockdown. Services and support closed, and sort of had alternative routes for that. Routines and structures that everybody had put into their days to make them cope and have good, active, and really sort of meaningful days really were disrupted in this. Earlier in the year, we decided that we would start up the buddying network. So we'd already started collating people's names of members that were interested and what they were interested in buddying with. And we really felt that sort of with this time, it was really important to concentrate this and get the ball rolling on this. So here we are in June, and we have buddied 100 people together now, which we're really, really pleased about. And that's carers, that's couples, that's daughters, sons, and that's people living with dementia as well. And like I really want to emphasize, it's not just carers that we've successfully matched as well. We've had some really, really good relationships with people that are living with a rare dementia and some really meaningful feedback from that. Most of the time, people do have the same diagnosis, so it's really sort of helpful because they understand the symptoms and what each other are going through, but that's not always the case. And actually, we found sort of in our small group discussions where it's brought people from different sort of backgrounds together, they've actually found something in common that they really sort of clicked with, and so we've budded those together. So what have we learned from this? Well, we've learned quite a lot, and actually geographic location is not important when buddying people, especially at the moment, because everything's online. So we have successfully managed in the last week to match a lady in Australia to a lady in Kent, and they've been chatting away online and sort of sharing their experiences. We've also buddied a lady from Singapore with another lady in the home counties. They met online at one of our small discussion groups, and they've been getting on like a house on fire. So it's really, really lovely to hear those stories. And different formats really work as well. So we sort of envisaged that when we started this, that it would be telephone, maybe online, but there are lots of IT savvy people out there, and there's lots of Zoom calls going on, Zoom meetings, WhatsApp, lots of different ways people are communicating. And again, that's just fantastic. The people can actually see each other. I think seeing people's faces is actually fantastic. And, you know, it sort of shows so much can be done sort of through these different means as well now. So before I go, I just want to share some quotes of some feedback that I've had from our members. And the first one here was from a lady who has been recently diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. And we matched her with another lady in a similar situation. And she said to me, "My family don't really understand what I'm going through. So it's so helpful to speak to someone in a similar situation." And then two gentlemen that I matched, they're both caring for their wives who are sadly in care homes now. An email I received last week was, "We have had few conversations now and we seem to be in similar positions. We seem to be getting on just fine." A little group of ladies that I put together who are looking after their husbands with FTD. So this works so perfectly, as even though our partners have different symptoms, we are all in the FT boat together. And the last one was from a couple of gentlemen who I've just introduced. They both have dementia with Lewy bodies. And this is what one of them said to me: "I've just had a good call with my buddy, and we hope to meet up as soon as possible after lockdown." So it's really encouraging that people are getting something back from this, and some meaningful friendships are being made. If you would like to get involved and be put on the database for our buddying and see if we can match you, please do get in contact with me, because we hope to make much more buddies out there from all of you that are joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I am going to call on Nikki. I've just had a window on my box appear saying I'm experiencing network difficulties. So if I suddenly look more statuesque than usual, I'll rely on Nikki to jump in if that's okay, and hopefully that one of us in Southeast London or Southwest London has enough bandwidth talking to you all. Nikki, thank you so much. It's really heartening to hear those conversations, and it really is, the buddying network is such a sort of fantastic and natural amplification of what happens normally when we're meeting physically together. It's always one of the most heartening things for me to see people forming friendships, exchanging numbers, meeting up in between meetings, and just being there for each other. because there's nothing else quite like it. Wonderful. Thank you very much for all of you who have sent in questions and comments. We're now moving into the stage of the meeting where we're going to be trying to address some of those. So if I could welcome everyone who's on the panel back onto the screen, so you don't just have to look at my ugly mug, that would be great. And I would just beg your advance apologies that on a small laptop and with relatively bad eyesight, reading questions and comments and thinking about the answer is seriously challenging my very poor multitasking skills. So at any point, please do feel free, members of the panel, to jump in. So we've got Ida back with us, we've got Livy Wood, who Claire and Nikki were both mentioning, Valley's back with us, and also Anna Balones, who's a fantastic nurse within the clinical service in Queen's Square and a great expert in all things rare dementia. So welcome to all of you, thank you very much for being here. I thought I would start with a quick comment and a question as a follow-up for you, Ida. The comment which I'll read out was, thank you very much. It was very helpful to break the interaction down into different stages. I've also found it important to reduce the conditions which seem to make impulsive behaviour more likely. My wife is in the early stages, possibly stage 3 of 7 of PCA. That's the visual form of dementia for those of you living with other conditions. We have together turned out lots of drawers, and she has decided which items to keep and which items to get rid of. We've also gone through old digital pictures of family, because these activities seem to have helped her to exercise her longer term memories, which are much better than her shorter term memories. So a really positive comment on positive activities and concentrating on things where one's strengths are. And then the question for you, Ida, is I find it, this from somebody else, I find it very difficult to keep behavioural records as my husband's mood and cognition changes so frequently through the day, and I would forever be making notes. I did start with this, but his behaviour constantly changed whilst I was doing it. He does suffer from Capgras syndrome, and I'm searching for different ways to cope with this, particularly as there are 3 of me. Do you have any suggestions on how to manage this? So if you could perhaps explain a little bit about what Capgras syndrome is for people who've not heard of that, and then talk a little bit about that question. I can repeat any of it if that's helpful at any point, Ida.
Thank you, Seb. You can hear me now, right? Yeah. So Capgras syndrome is a kind of delusional misidentification in which the person thinks that a close relative is not the person who that person says to be. Like, for instance, you can look at your husband and you can think, yeah, he looks like my husband, but he is not my husband. He is a different person. So this is Capgras syndrome. And Capgras syndrome can come up in different ways. So, for instance, I think this lady mentioned that there are three of her. So it's 3 versions of herself. And this is also very common, that there is a reduplication. There is like several copies of you being an imposter, you being a person different from who you say you are. And this is common, and it is part of the syndrome. A very important thing when we face a delusional misidentification of any kind is to respond in a way that favors the escalation of stress, because the absolute priority is your well-being and the well-being of your person. So any reaction that can support you to have a calm and nice interaction is advisable. A huge challenge coming from managing delusional misidentifications is to redefine normality, because a delusional misidentification is something very, very strange to live if it is the first time that you live it, and it sounds like something that comes out from a different world. So it is very important to understand that that reality is a completely valid reality. It's a real experience, and it needs to be respected and acknowledged as such. this is easy to say. It is much more difficult to put in practice, because also the emotional impact of having a loved one of yours not identifying you when looking at you, is the emotional shock is huge. So it takes time and practice to develop the skills to handle properly delusional misidentifications. It is very important to remember that they are real. So the interaction needs to be from my real experience to your real experience, not from my real experience, which is the right one, and your experience, which is wrong, because it is not real. That cannot happen. Both of you are living a real experience. And this is general advice. To be able to give more specific advice about this case, I will need more details. I will need to know, for instance, how this Cagra's syndrome shows up, and what does she do to react to it, and what are the problems that this is creating, because the problems are different for different people, the challenges are different for different people. So I will need more information to be able to respond. And about the behavior records, again, I will need more information. I will need to see how she completes the behavior records, because a behavior record is something very well known, but actually proper train, they are not that easy to complete. They are not that easy to use, and you need support and training and practice. And there are no straight responses and solutions when using a behavior record. It is a skill to develop. And if you haven't received proper support to use it, there are very common mistakes, like, for instance, trying to tackle several behaviors in one go, which makes you just feel, useless and unable to do it. And it is not your fault. It is just that it's not the right technique, it's not the right approach. So there are many variables and many barriers for you to be using a behavior record properly. But this needs to be investigated. You need specific information and accurate information about how the behavior record is being used. I don't know if this is useful.
That's great, Ida, thank you. And we're very aware in this sort of setting that we are trying to give as direct responses as we can, but of course there will be lots of these things which would benefit from following up. So as usual, the RDS team will be sharing learning from this Q&A session after the event, but we're also always really keen for you to get in touch with us for more one-to-one thinking through problems that you're raising. Thank you. I should have also said to Libby, Vali and Anna, please do feel free at any moment to jump in or wave a hand to me if you'd like to comment. So in this case on Capgras syndrome or anything else, because I think it's really, I'm just throwing the questions out there as a starter for 10, but please do jump in and share your experience too. I thought next I might come to perhaps to Livy and Anna, but Vali may have comments too if it's appropriate to her. And there's about sundowning. So the question received is, is there any particular advice on how to manage sundowning? In this case, it's for early onset Alzheimer's disease, but I think this applies to a number of different conditions. And particularly the situation here is that the person is caring for also for their partner, but also for two very small and active children of 3 and 7 who are in the house. And it's around their bedtime that this becomes a particular issue, around 9 o'clock. And it seems to coincide with a real mood change. And the size, the questioner also comments that the size and layout of the house means that finding a separate quiet space to go to within the house is really, really tough. So another example of multiple factors, social, physical environment coming together to make this a really difficult situation to comment. Would either of you like to start with any comments on that one?
I'm happy to start, and then Anna, if you want to join in, if you have any other anything else to add. So I'll start by saying that there's lots of reasons why sundowning occurs. As the day goes on, somebody living with dementia might become more tired. This can lead to their symptoms worsening, but also things like hunger, thirst, physical pain can also play part in that. So thinking about tips for managing sundowning as it happens, some people might use distraction techniques. I'm very aware that what I'm going to be saying, it might not be relevant for everyone, and I'm aware that everybody's experiences of living with dementia are different, but some people might find using distraction techniques, so going into a different room, making a drink, having a snack, turning music on, helpful. Another tip may be to ask the person what is the matter, so listen carefully to the response, and if possible, see if you can deal with their source of distress. Talking in a slow and soothing way, and also touch, so holding the person's hand or sitting close to them, things like that. Practical tips for preventing sundowning. These could be things like following a routine during the day that contains activities that the person enjoys, making sure you're going outside for walks or visiting shops. I know that that's very difficult at the moment with coronavirus, but in general, getting some good exercise. It's also important to remember to limit the person living with dementia's intake of caffeinated drinks. So consider stopping them from drinking anything with caffeine after midday, and also alcoholic drinks. So thinking about caffeine-free tea, coffee, cola, and alcohol-free beer and wine. Also potentially trying to limit the person's naps during the day to encourage them to sleep well at night instead. And more environmental things, so potentially like closing the curtains and turning the lights on before dusk begins to try and ease the transition into nighttime. And Anna, do you have anything else to add about that?
Yeah, so they said that there's no sort of a possible or known cause for the sundowning, but the things that Levy mentioned are the sort of theory around it. The most I think it affects is the lights. So the most important thing is exposure to lights during the day, especially now that we are in the summer. Exposure to light is very important. Also, at nighttime when the sundowning is coming up, I know that there are 2 active young ones within the family, so probably, like Levy said, distracting while the children are going to bed, and then giving him a little bit of task like folding something or drying the dishes, that will make the tasks separate, and also turning the lights on. There are an occupational therapy assessment for the environment will help in finding that right angle to put the lights where there are available lights now that copy the beam of sun. So having an occupational therapy assessment will help as well, with the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I always forget at least once during these sessions to turn my own microphone back on, hence the delay. Not sort of shock and awe. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, and I just emphasize what Anna and Livy were both saying, I guess particularly with the joys and challenges of having small people to look after as well, that anything that can be done as early in the day as possible or other times. I remember being particularly struck a couple of years ago at a PCA support group meeting, people with a visual form of dementia, and one of our members, an international member, happened to also be an international sleep research expert, and she described how both in her work but also in her experience of looking after her husband with PCA, she found particularly there's a lot of evidence out there about the earlier in the day that you can get a large dose of sunlight that really helps to regulate the circadian rhythms of the brain, those parts of our sort of brain circuits which we can't control but which have a really big impact upon the rhythms of everyday life. So thank you. And I think also I'm pretty sure there's a good video from Ida, a lockdown, in which Ida had also been noticing the disruption to sleep patterns, which is on the website under the coronavirus section. So thank you very much for that question and those responses. I wanted to, I've managed to lose my screen, that's not helpful. I wanted to come perhaps to Vali and Anna next, with a question about the use of memantine to help with symptoms in Lewy body dementia. There's not much more than that. I guess it's someone living or caring for someone living with dementia with Lewy bodies, and kind of curious about whether those medications can be helpful. So I wondered, Anna or Vali, if you had any comments on that.
Vali, shall I go first, or would you like to go first?
You go, Anna. That's fine.
So memantine generally is used with dementia and in the moderate and late stage of the condition, and or when someone got a bad side effect to the first line of treatment, just the donepezil or the rivastigmine. The NICE guideline now advocates that with dementia, we could add on memantine as and the evidence that both of them works together is the outcome is very good. So with Lewy body dementia, I've been helping out Dr. Weil in her clinic, and I've been seeing a lot of people using memantine or being prescribed memantine, and it's helping making clear thinking and helping with the cognitive symptoms of the conditions. Obviously, people are different. People may react differently to drugs, so every medication has got its side effects, and I do guide and review people when they are on memantine, and if side effects comes up, I do give advice on what to do and how to sort of resolve the issue.
Just to add a little bit, in our case, Des started a year after the diagnosis. He was put on the rivastigmine, and for cognitive side, and at the same time, or just a little bit later, on something to do with the levodopa. I can never say it right, levodopa, I can't remember. But anyway, so the rivastigmine worked really well in Des's case, almost immediately, and it was kind of put to the test. I can't remember when, a year later or something. There was a research here in the JR in the hospital in Oxford about the effect of rivastigmine. So Des did a session of, the cognitive test and assessment. He did it with rivastigmine and without rivastigmine, and there was a distinctive difference in his performance. So ever since then, we are on rivastigmine, and slowly but surely we're kind of increasing the dose. So we're on 3 medications basically: 1 rivastigmine, 2 for the Parkinson's side, and the 3rd one is just for his stomach to tolerate the medications, rethanidine or something. These are the 3 medications that he's been taking after the first year of diagnosis, and they've been working really well for him.
Ali, thank you very much. And to Anna, that's really helpful response. And of course, we can provide more information by email about these medications if you have questions, or if you have very specific questions about your own medication levels. Obviously, we'd encourage you to speak to the clinician who's in charge of your care and prescribing those. The next question is, of course, very topical. Everything's topical in this session, but particularly the issue about the interaction between dementia and coronavirus. So I was wondering if I could come back to you, Ida. I know you've been doing a lot of work with international colleagues to try and better understand the impact that COVID-19 is having, especially for people living with different forms of dementia, both at home and in care home settings. The very specific question, which is perhaps where to start, is there any further evidence that coronavirus causes damage? I presume that means damage neurologically or damage to people specifically in terms of worsening dementia symptoms. So if you could tackle that first, that would be great.
Yeah. We have limited understanding about coronavirus and the impact in the brain because there hasn't been enough time to generate proper, robust empirical evidence. But there are the few series of inpatient, of patients that have been hospitalized have started to come up and been published in very high impact journals. And for instance, in a case series from Wuhan, that was the first place affected by the pandemic, they've published a series from a large hospital, and they saw that up to 50% of people with infected by coronavirus may develop neurological symptoms, and this has been later confirmed by other case series from different countries across the world. And what the authors found in this paper is that those that present with more severe COVID presentations have an increased risk of stroke. So if you are already living with cognitive difficulties, you get infected with COVID, and this increases your chances to have a stroke, and you have a stroke, this will obviously have an impact in your cognitive decline. And on a different note, if you get infected with COVID and you have cognitive difficulties, your chances of being admitted, of needing hospital care are increased. And we know that for people living with dementia, hospital stays are not very pleasant because also increase a lot the risk of delirium. And delirium can also have an impact on your cognitive function and your psychological health. And also we know that the longer you stay in hospital, the more likely it is that you experience more cognitive decline, and also it will take you longer to recover from a functional point of view once you are discharged. And the other piece of information, we need to be very careful interpreting this data because we are at the very early days of understanding the impact of COVID. So please, all these be, I want to make very clear that this is very early data, and this is just data suggesting things, but we are not completely sure. But we've started seeing that the ICU, the post-ICU syndrome is very severe for some patients that have gone through COVID, being admitted to ICU, they have recovered, but the post-ICU syndrome is very severe. They are needing many weeks and in some cases months of support and rehabilitation. So this can also have a more severe impact on you if you are already living with cognitive difficulties. And I think this is a summary of what we know so far about the impact. Okay, sorry, Bali. I've seen Bali raising her hand. Yeah, I finished.
No, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to save that for you. Just to say, to add very small bit about the coronavirus, not from a kind of physiological or medical, but I think psychological and emotional as well. And that, for Des, and in our experience, Des is a very sociable character. Des, he could, he's Irish and he can talk to the devil, and he could, he talks to people in the street and shakes hands with everybody. So you could imagine how hard it is for him to actually lose that interaction. Yeah. So, for example, because of his vulnerability being with dementia, he doesn't do the shopping, he doesn't go out to shops or all of that stuff. So the social interaction element is missing hugely. Now, a lot of his activities related to dementia and the meetings are on Zoom, just like everything else, including yoga and, chatting and walking and talking about a lot and singing and all of that is on Zoom. And still, it's very hard for him to actually hook the point that, do we have to provide drinks for people on the meeting? Can we bring drinks to the meetings? How can we actually share the flowers or whatever activities that they're supposed to do? So that element and the psychological effect is the hardest one for him.
Thank you. Really helpful points. Thank you. I'd like to move us over now to a question about frontotemporal dementia, and perhaps to come to Livia, if that's okay. The lady, as a person writing the question, says, I'm a lady caring for her husband with frontotemporal dementia, and considering that symptoms of early frontotemporal dementia are subtle but very specific, why does the frontline medical and counselling community miss suspecting or referring on for the diagnosis? I've been to GPs, various counsellors, and with difficult behaviours and a deteriorating relationship, it only seems to have been when memory starts to deteriorate that some form of dementia is considered, and how can this be improved?
Okay, I might need you to repeat little aspects of that, but I can start. So I think quite a lot of people find this a challenge, particularly because of the symptoms with BVFT FTD, particularly, so the behavioural variant of FTD, it can overlap with a lot of other psychiatric conditions. So I think, as that lady was saying, that it's only when memory is involved that people seem to associate it with the dementia. And this seems to be a long-standing issue with some professionals who aren't aware of the rarer types of dementia, and particularly that dementia doesn't always mean that your memory is going to be affected. So, sorry, Seb, can you repeat the end of that question for me, please?
Yeah, I suppose it was just a general comment on what we can do to improve that situation.
Okay, and from being in healthcare previously, I love it when people talk to me about their diagnosis, especially if it's something that I am not 100% clued up on. And so my advice would be really to feel confident in educating healthcare professionals. In the direct support team, we would be able to give you resources that you can share with members and professionals. We also have other resources, so online resources. We do a course called The Many Faces of Dementia, which is particularly good for people who work in healthcare, and it is focused on the rarer types of dementia, so particularly those who aren't memory led, and for them to learn about that. I would stress that being a family member of someone with FTD or someone with FTD themselves, they are the expert in their own right. So being able to talk about how it affects them and have that confidence to talk to healthcare professionals about behavioural variant FTD is what I would suggest.
Thanks, Libby, and I'd second that. I'll come on in a moment to some questions about education in general and how collectively both those of you living with the conditions and us as a team can try and help broaden exactly what Libby's talking about, of connecting that personal experience to kind of actions you need from these gatekeepers of care and support. Just before we do that though, I just wanted to come to Valley. One comment which starts with stars around it saying congratulations to Valley, which is always nice to hear. The person says, your presentation graphics really helped me to visualize what's going on in our relationship and how my wife and I are reacting to our situation. Plus the phrase not defined by dementia is so relevant to how she wishes to be seen. So that's really helpful, thank you. But perhaps I could also ask you to comment, Valley, on a comment relating, I suppose, a bit more to what Nikki was saying about buddying. And this person says, buddying is not for me. I have the general concern that with the support available, that those living with dementia are encouraged to meet together and spend time together. Given the diagrams from in Valley's talk, our feeling is that we want to be away from it and not constantly reminded of it. We want a break from it. So absolutely, I'm sure lots of people in the meeting will echo and share that concern, a bit of an approach avoidance situation. You want people to understand, but you don't want to be defined by it. So it's a bit of a push and pull. Valley, any comments?
Absolutely. I totally agree with this person and what they said, because that's when that slide I started to kind of break through, and I wanted to get out of that box. I just felt that, you know, there's a meeting on Monday for that, there's a meeting on Sunday for that, there's a meeting with it, there's a whole load of meetings about dementia, which is fantastic. I am so grateful that at the beginning, the first year, when you don't know what you don't know, there's just so much you don't know. And every time you go to a meeting or you talk to somebody, you find out something else. You found out something that you didn't know about, and you can't access this resource, or you can access this benefit, and how you do from simple practical things like your bus, how do you do the bus pass, and how do you do the car thingy, the badge for the car, the benefit, to actually just general resources to understand. There's so much, and it just gets overwhelming. And this is the moment that you just need to be as a partner. I have to say, I don't go with the word carer. In my view, I have quite strong feelings about this word. I call myself a partner. I'm still a partner with Des in our journey together. And that part of the journey, as it happened, it included dementia. So in our journey together, there comes a moment when you need to just step out, just breathe, just take a breath of fresh air and see the world outside that box of dementia. When you do that, it's interesting, the dynamics. You're at a different level than your partner. At the time that I was breaking out, I was kind of being very resentful and very kind of critical of all these meetings. But they're not doing this, but they're not doing that, but they need to include this, they need to include that. They need to see the world from dementia, from people living with dementia. It's got to be dementia friendly. I was getting a bit too critical because I was inside the box and I couldn't see the world from outside the box. And I think it's another load on us as partners is to try slowly but surely leave your partner in the box. It's fine until they find some confidence and some I don't know, some comfort in where they are and some level of acceptance of where they are. But slowly but surely move out, leaving a foot in the box. I'm always got a foot in the box there, so I don't miss out on how Des is feeling and what Des is exposed to, and just keeping an eye and ear and antennas on any level of vulnerability, for example, that may come through emails or any communication. So always keep a foot inside the box, but keep an eye outside the box as well. So you see your partner in and out. You see yourself regain some energy, get yourself some boost to see the world, and actually to emphasize the word validate. To be able to validate what they're going through, you need to step out a bit. Your partner may be at a different stage. They may at sometimes be completely out, they may be in. You just have to be strong enough with some resources outside in order for you to deal with what's going on with your partner inside. I'm sorry, I talked a lot. I don't know if you understood what I'm saying, but it's that dynamic of going in and out all the time. And then to come to terms and to come to a comfortable position where I feel I am at now, that I am not defined by dementia. It's part of my life. It's part of my life journey. It's what my partner is going through. But I'm not defined by it, and I don't want him to be 100% defined by it. So that little bit, the blue circle, the blue part in the outside the box is very significant. The other part where we mix together, but outside that box is very important as well. But we still need to validate what's happening inside the box, so they don't feel that their experience is not validated. I hope that made sense.
Thank you, Vali, absolutely did. And just to echo both the question and some of your response, this was a question which we don't have time to take, but I want to read it as a comment for further reflection. Is some of the advice on here is very helpful and offers new techniques to use at home and also helps me to take a different perspective. However, this role is exhausting and I'm concerned about how carers are being left behind. Our own health, social life, looking after other members of the family, working full time, who helps you with this? And so I just should echo back to what Vali was saying and say that is very much something which we're trying to support you in, but of course it's a complex social network that you're involved in, and sometimes people don't step forward and assist in the way that we would hope they would. I wondered if I could come to Anna and Ida perhaps next about a couple of specific questions relating to frontotemporal dementia again. So one question is, my wife has frontotemporal dementia and is unable to communicate verbally. We have one particularly problematic behaviour, which is going to the door in order to leave the house, often at inappropriate times and or inappropriately clad, but with probably a number of different triggers. These could include, although it's impossible for me to be sure, the end of a mealtime, boredom, the need to get away from irritating carers, etc., etc. What is a suitable response may depend on the trigger, but how can you determine what the trigger is?
Anna.
Okay. So they said that behavior is a form of communication, and once there is a behavior, the other person is communicating something, and we are required to sort of listen to that communication in a way that we can, as much as we can. So you're asking about the question was about triggers. I guess it would be like Ida said earlier on, that every possible trigger that you would, or that you would sort of think about is a way of picking out which one really is giving the response or the behavior. It's a long process. It's not easy, and it's a trial and error, and also, but start with the easy one, making the environment a little bit quiet, having, if it's boredom, maybe, you know, after dinner time. What does she do before, in the past, after your dinner? Do you take a walk? Do you go somewhere quiet? So those things are some things that I could think of responding to that behavior.
Thanks, Anna. And I think it's also worth commenting that lots of people looking after someone with frontotemporal dementia also comment about something which the neurologists call utilization behavior. So the idea is that sometimes something will be in your environment, like a cup or a door handle, and you respond to it almost out of habit, like bringing the cup to your lips or turning the door handle. And of course, we from the outside, you're absolutely, as the questioner says, we can never quite be sure what the motivation for a behavior is, but we can try and pick up the patterns, as Anna was saying. But sometimes some of those behaviors don't have a particular emotional or intentional trigger. People are just responding to what's around them. So it's easy also, we have to be aware that sometimes we can overinterpret why things are happening. Ida.
Yes, so I completely agree with Anna. Thank you very much for responding to this question. And just to clarify, because I didn't explain this properly during my presentation, that triggers can be triggers that come from the outside world or from the inside world. So the easiest way of starting learning how to do a behavior record is focusing on those in the outside world, because those you can observe, you don't need to speculate. So a very common difficulty that people encounter when start working with behavior records is distinguishing the objective trigger from the feeling around the trigger. And you don't need to think about the feeling around once you, at the beginning, when you are starting using the record, because that is too complicated. You will get distracted. What you need to annotate in the behavior record is what happened just before the behavior happened, without any further speculation, because this will help you establish a routine and build knowledge. If you aim to come up with solutions for the triggers as you are completing the record, this will become too complicated. Your job is only to write down what happened just before the behavior show up. Oh, and another thing, sorry, about the nonverbal communication. There are speech and language therapists with a lot of experience on nonverbal communication and supporting people who cannot communicate verbally anymore. And some of them are specialized in dementia. So I don't know how easy it is to get support from one of them, but I know that there are speech and language therapists working on the field. And there are strategies that they use and tools that they can share.
Right. I'm very mindful of time. I know a lot of you will have commitments to rush back to, and a lot of you it will be extremely difficult to have been here with us today. So I think we'll draw the questions to a close there, but there have been at least 15 questions that I'm afraid we've not had the chance to answer. So what we'll do as a team is try to respond to those with a few words and gather those together and respond for everyone to see by email, if that's okay. But an encouragement again, please do get in touch with us if you would like further comments. Just a couple of general points which cropped up in a number of questions. One was this recurring issue at this meeting and others about education. How can we get people to understand better? GPs, opticians, speech and language therapists, benefits advisors, the whole gamut of people who you are coming into contact with and you need their help. We are very aware of this issue. I know that there's no magical solution or something that I can just offer you today, but we have just brought in our first education officer, a role that Chris Hardy in our group has taken up. And we are putting plans together to try and gather a whole team of people together to try and facilitate kind of what Libby was saying, this ability for you to share the vital information that's relevant to whatever professional you're seeing at the point of delivery, because we can't train every profession at the beginning of their careers about these rare dementias if they're only going to see one or two people in their career with these conditions. But what we can do is enable you to have the right bit of information at the right time to hand to people so they can go, I've never seen anyone with PCA, I'm an optician, but here's a short video of an optician who has seen people with PTA telling me how I need to change my standard practice in order to best serve this person sat in front of me. That's what we're aiming for. It will to some extent put an extra burden on you guys, but we hope as possible to make it as light touch as we can, so you can be a kind of conduit of the right information at the right time. Another, just very in closing, as I ask, thank our panel members for all of their contributions, both in what they've said earlier and also in their responses to questions, and invite Nikki back onto the screen in case she's got any last comments. One question, very general and very appropriate, was when are we all going to be back together? Sadly, we don't know. Welcome Collection, which is and the trust where we usually meet physically together in London at least, is probably not going to be hosting meetings for the rest of this calendar year. So it's really tough, and we are deeply missing you all and being able to connect to you, but I think it will be sometime. So we'll keep meeting online, but we're always responsive and happy to have suggestions for you about how we can best try to connect you in the meantime, whether it's by these webinar meetings, the one-to-one contact, the small group conversations, which hopefully, as we were talking about, more for you as people rather than as people as carriers of a label, to connect about issues that are important to you or just give you a bit of time out. But we will be trying to absolutely restart the physical meetings as soon as government and other limits allow us to. So a huge thank you to you all again for your time, for your contributions. Please do keep the comments or questions coming. Any feedback is always very gratefully received. And I'll just hand back to Nikki for any final comments and thank yous.
Thank you, Seb. That was great. I just do want to make a comment on one of the questions of the education to health professionals. One thing that we really have noticed is we have had an enormous increase of health professionals signing up as members, which is really, really positive to us, because those health professionals are reaching out to us saying, I am now seeing patients with dementia with Lewy bodies, with PPA, with FTD. How can we support them? So one thing that we are doing is supporting those health professionals to support you. So although it seems that not much is happening out there, behind those scenes, these health professionals do want to learn. So that is really encouraging. I think it's been fantastic today. It's been great to have everybody speaking and some really fantastic learning for everybody. Like Seb says, we really do hope to be back seeing you face to face in future, but we have got some more groups, some small discussion groups, which we were going to be coming out in July. We're just doing the preparation from that. And for the past ones that we've done this last month, we have learned so much from everybody, and we have some fantastic stories, and had actually with the people with living with rare dementia, the experiences they have shown us has been amazing to actually evolve support going forward. So we're really looking forward to that. One thing I would like to say before we go is we are collecting some stories from people about their experiences at the moment, from how the lockdown and the coronavirus has impacted on their lives. Valley, you touched on it today, and I know Des is such a sociable person, and it must have a huge impact on him. So if anybody has any stories like that, please do get in contact with us and share them. And that's all we really have got time for today, and we really hope to be back with you very, very soon.
Great. I was just going to add a very brief thank you, but a very important thank you to Emily, Roberta, Millie and others who are behind the scenes. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that we're going to leave you with we're going to say goodbye on the screen, and we're going to leave you with a short video from our wonderful colleagues at the National Brain Appeal, who support many of you in fundraising for the work of rare dementia support and the kind of education and support activities that we've been talking about. So without further ado, thank you again. We will see you all soon, we hope, at one of our various sessions, and here's the video.
Hello, my name is Eva Tate, and I'm the Major Appeals Manager and Manager of the Rare Dementia Support Fund, held by the charity the National Brain Appeal. The National Brain Appeal raises money as the dedicated charity for the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery and UCL Queen's Square Institute of Neurology. The National Brain Appeal raises funds for rare dementia supports 2,000 members to help individuals living with rare and early onset forms of dementia, their families, friends, and healthcare professionals. And we also hold several other funds for FTD and dementia research. The funding helps not only the support group meetings in London, but also the regional support groups, admin and support staff, and all other associated expenses, including the new online support groups. When things return to normal, there are travel and accommodation bursaries available to help members attend the meetings. This year, we've raised our fundraising target to 300,000, and this will rise further to 350,000 by 2022 to develop and extend the service in the areas of education, support, and research, with the ultimate aim that everyone affected by a form of rare dementia will have access to specialist information and support, as well as contact with other people with a similar condition. We apply for grants from grant-making trusts, foundations, and livery companies, and have a wonderful group of supporters, some of whom are here today, who fundraise for us in an amazing variety of ways. We would love it if you would like to sign up to our RDS fundraising newsletter to hear more of these stories and receive news of how we can support this community. We have had people do head shaves for us. We have had a gentleman drive across the Mongolian steppe in a VW Polo, and we have lots of people who take part in runs and virtual runs as well. At the end of February, we held a gala dinner called Mission Possible, where we raised 110,000 for the expansion of rare dementia support. And we are delighted to announce that in line with this expansion, the charity is committed to raise up to 7 million to create the world's first centre of excellence for rare dementias. If anyone would like to discuss any fundraising ideas or the new capital appeal, please do feel free to email me or my colleague Alexis, our Senior Fundraising Manager, who will speak about the innovative new ways you can be involved in fundraising for RDS, even during this challenging time. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alexis Gebby and I'm the Senior Fundraising Officer at the National Brain Appeal. I just want to start off by saying a huge thank you to all of you who already fundraise for RDS. We really appreciate all of your incredible efforts, especially at this difficult time. My role at the National Brain Appeal is to look after all the amazing people taking on various fundraising activities for us. We have had people challenging themselves to run marathons, cycle long distances, climb mountains, and even take on skydives, all whilst raising money for RDS. We also have wonderful fundraisers out in the community who organise golf days, hold coffee mornings, host choir and carol concerts, and even shave their heads. These people ensure that more people like you can be supported through rare dementia support. If you're interested in becoming one of our fundraising heroes, then please do contact me. I am here to support you with your fundraising, and I'm more than happy to chat about any ideas that you may have. While at the moment it isn't possible to take part in a sporting challenge or hold a big fundraising gathering in your local community, we do have some fundraising ideas, such as taking on a solo virtual run or walk, hosting a quiz for your friends or family online, asking for birthday donations in lieu of going out, or even donating money that you may be saving by not travelling to work or buying your daily coffee. Do get in touch with me if you would like to get involved. In the meantime, take care and we hope to see you soon.